Sure am.
I'd like to now introduce Jonathan D. Simone, who is chair of the Elementary School Building Committee. The Elementary School Building Committee, as many of you know, has been hard at work basically since last July with a grueling meeting schedule that no one could even, I tried going for a while and I didn't have the time to follow, so I really do respect the amount of time that has been put into the process of hopefully putting to rest the issue of what to do about the fact that the Batchelder School is overcrowded, that we have an increasing enrollment at the elementary level, and that we need to do something to solve this space needs issue. So Jonathan is going to be talking about the process and why Swan Pond, or question 2, is being recommended by the ESBC. Jonathan.
Great. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here and walk through our recommendation. As Amy mentioned, last June we began a process to reevaluate the space needs at the elementary school level for the town of North Reading. That process involved 3 distinct phases. I'm going to take you through a very brief summary of that work today. The first is looking at the actual level of need in terms of enrollment and the space that we have. The second is a look at the various options that we did evaluate over the course of that time period. And third, to talk to you a little bit more about why we believe that Swan Pond is the right answer. So let me start with enrollment. And we began with short-term enrollment. And what you can see is over the last 5 years, from 1997 to 2002, enrollment has steadily grown. The forecasted enrollment for the 2003 to 2005 time period is approximately 1,400 students, those dashed lines at the top of the page. What's interesting is if you look at the bars on the left-hand side, in gray, the forecast has consistently been lower than the actual enrollment, the blue bars on the right. That said, we have based our work on a short-term enrollment forecast of 1,400. However, we didn't want to leave it at the short-term level because there have been a number of questions as to exactly how much space we need 20 years from now. And so, with the help of the planning department, we actually conducted a build-out analysis. In summary, that analysis suggests a target of 1,400 students enrollment is reasonable but conservative. And let me mention a few things about what we did. The planning department was kind enough to literally look lot by lot in the town of North Reading to understand the potential for subdivision and expansion of the household base in the town. What they found was that there are approximately 1,300 new homes that could be built based on existing subdivisions and restrictions, etc. And that's assuming that some of that land is wetland and can't be built on. And it was a very rigorous analysis done by the planning department. There's a second wrinkle to this, and that's why you see 2 bars on this page, one in blue and one in yellow. North Reading is currently a very young town in terms of its demographic. The implications of North Reading staying a very young family town would yield enrollments that correspond to the blue bars on this page, which actually at the low end would be 1,500, at the high end would be well over 1,600. Recognizing, however, that that may not actually be the case over the next 20 years, we actually got information from about a dozen neighboring towns, many of whom have already gone through their biggest building phases, and based on those peers, looked at what the implications would be for enrollment at the elementary school level, and those are the bars you see in yellow. The ESBC assumption, which is highlighted at about 1,400 students, uses the demographics of our peers rather than the demographics of the town today, which yield a much greater need. In addition, while the planning department forecast approximately 1,300 homes could be built, we've actually only assumed 60% of those will be built over the next 20 years. So again, attempting to be conservative and not build more space than we need. What does this enrollment mean for space? Well, you can translate the enrollment at the elementary level into the number of sections per grade. So how many first grades are there at all the schools in North Reading, etc. What an enrollment of 1,400 means is that we need 11 sections per grade to realize desired class sizes. We have space for 10 sections today, 10 permanent sections. Modular classrooms recently approved will help that in the short term, but that is not a permanent space solution and is much higher cost, as we'll talk about a little bit later. than permanent space. What's interesting about the 22, 11 sections and our desired class size of 22 is that we actually posted a questionnaire on the Massachusetts Superintendent Usenet. And we received responses from well over a dozen different communities. I think actually about 20 or so responded to us, indicating that the class size target of around 22 is basically in line with all of our peers. Very few communities, actually most communities, have a class size target below 22 at the elementary level. Now, we put on here the bars on the left-hand side for 1,400 students, so where we would expect to be. It's important to keep in mind that if we find ourselves actually at a much higher enrollment because we have more build-out or North Reading stays a younger family type of community, we will be well above that number of 22 children per classroom. And you can see it's the blue bars that represent 11 sections implicate the average class size if you build 11 sections per grade. So we don't have the number of sections we need today based on the enrollment. In addition, 3 of those sections at the bat shelter are basically the end of their useful life. And let me take you through some very interesting commentary for a second. Look at the HVAC system at the bat shelter. And these are some quotes from engineering reports that have been done in the building over the years. The current heating system should be completely replaced if the structure is to continue as a school facility. Replacing an HVAC system in a building like this doesn't just involve replacing the boiler. It means going in and replacing all the ductwork buried behind the walls. It's quite a job. On the electrical system, the present systems and equipment as observed are, in our opinion, not salvageable. Plumbing. All the wire piping should be replaced due to its age and condition. Environmental. Asbestos was used throughout the building. And on the structure, it is antiquated by today's standards and has some unique problems, particularly those involving vertical circulation and egress. Though many individual items have been upgraded during the life of the building as a whole, significant work would be required to bring the facility up to full compliance with the current building code in the areas of structural, that's seismic, lateral forces, and snow loads, energy efficiency, and ADA and MAAB compliance. So the building as it stands right now is very much below state standards and codes and guidelines. I could mention other things as well, such as sprinklers, which don't exist in the building, which are required by current codes. In addition, not only is the structure of the building in need of a lot of work, the classrooms themselves are below state standards in just about every room. So we know we have a problem at the bat shelter, and we know we need more space. How do we think about evaluating options? We use a number of criteria. Criteria in thinking about the site where a school could be built or renovated, regulatory issues, who needed to approve the project, cost, both the cost of the construction itself as well as what that would do to the operating budget in the future, and a variety of other factors such as its impact on education and relocation of students. Let me talk very briefly about a couple of those. The amount of land owned under the site category might seem like a relatively small one, but it's important for a couple of reasons. North Reading doesn't have a lot of parcels that would be of sufficient size to build an elementary school on. You need about 10 to 15 acres of buildable land to construct an elementary school. And in addition, the state does not reimburse you if you're required to purchase that land for the school. You bear that cost entirely on your own. In terms of regulatory approvals, there are a number of town boards which would need to approve of an elementary school. The Community Planning Commission in terms of how that fit into traffic patterns and requirements for parking, various other issues. The Historic District Commission, if anything is inside the Historic District. The Conservation Committee is an important one as well, as a number of the options we looked at actually had involved the Conservation Commission. In terms of cost, we'll talk a little bit more in a few slides here, but we actually did look at the operating costs that all of these solutions would have into the future. And while the amount you're being asked to vote on May 7th is strictly for the direct project cost, we didn't want to let our decision and recommendation be misguided if we actually had an option which created more cost in the future. And relocation is the final one worth mentioning as a criterion. You know, I know a lot of people have gone to school under varying conditions, but it was very important, based on the bachelor community today, to keep that community in a safe environment while whatever is done to that building or at another site takes place, that the educational process can continue, that the children and staff can be safe while that is ongoing. Using this criteria, we reviewed almost 20 options and didn't find all that many that were attractive. The 20 fell into 3 broad categories: using existing buildings but not actually adding to the town's inventory of buildings, building a new facility, which would be Swan Pond or various other locations in town that we evaluated, or actually moving to 4 schools. And we looked at that a little bit as well. Let me summarize why we didn't find those attractive. In terms of the existing buildings, using space already to Hood or the Little, or the Murphy, there's a land that's in dispute at the Hood. The Little School site is very small. For those of you who've been there, it's already very landlocked and hard to move around that site. You could, of course, use the Murphy Center, but that creates a need for a new town hall and additional disruption. And you could use the middle school as well, but that means you've got to build a new middle school or a new high school. So only the Batchelder, a renovation addition to the Batchelder, or a slight addition to the Hood met our criteria. In terms of new buildings, between land acquisition costs, the presence of wetlands, and other location factors, only Swan Pond met the ESBC criteria. And finally, in 4 schools, there's a very high fixed cost to just opening the doors of the school, even if there are no students and no primary teachers. That's in the order of $250,000 to $500,000 a year. And you have additional common areas that you wouldn't need if you only could operate with 3 schools. So we found ourselves quickly narrowed down to the same 2 options that we've talked about for a long time, those being the Batchelder and a school at Swan Pond. However, let me talk about one option that we heard a lot about from people as we went through this process over the last 9 months, and that is a new high school. And it's very appealing at first because it's a facility that is typically the most utilized school in town, and has a lot of appeal, but there are some issues with that new high school. Number 1, there's no suitable site of 25 to 35 acres, which is the amount of land you need for a high school. Swan Pond only has about 10 to 15 buildable acres, and is not very central if you want to put a high school there. One piece of property that people have mentioned quite often in this, with this option is the Berry property, but that's actually owned by the state and committed for private development. Development, which, by the way, which will bring tax revenues and help address some of our operating issues as well. So that land has a better use. In addition, a new high school would cost $30 to $50 million versus the current secondary school building committee plan of about $10 million at the high school. We don't really need a new high school. The building that we have today is in relatively good shape, but a little bit small. And the SSBC has been working to make that the high school that we can use for the next 25 years. In addition, it's not clear why the state would want to invest more money in North Reading, as building a new high school would entail more funding from the state than if we proceed with the plans that we have in place today. In addition, school buildings are not actually all that flexible. You can't take an elementary school and make it a middle school. You can't take a high school and make it a middle school. That requires significant renovations to turn any of these schools into another. That's because they have labs, they have dedicated spaces, the classroom sizes themselves are a little bit different, and of course in an elementary environment you have much smaller children, so that causes some complications as well. And finally, it would take a long time, even if a new high school was to be proposed, it would take a long time to complete, and we need the space today. Basically, you have to build a new high school, which would take 3-4 years from today, since we don't have any plans or even an architect. We have to then renovate the high school into a middle school for that school population, and then we could renovate the middle school as an elementary school once the middle school students have left that. So you're talking probably the better part of a decade before you actually have a solution to our school needs as a community, whereas the elementary school solution that we're proposing would bring that solution at the elementary level in the next 3 years or thereabouts, and the secondary schools plan would not be much beyond that. So given this, why did we recommend Swan Pond? 4 reasons why we recommended a school at Swan Pond. Number 1, it's the simplest elementary school solution. It's one project, unlike renovating the Batchelder and